is much too much, or wouldn't you say? A second is too short, an eon too long. A week is just stupid, and so is this song. Ooh, everybody's got a half an hour. Haven't you got a half an hour? This bill only needs a half an hour. So come in and stay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kirchenbauer Half an Hour live from Bangkok, Thailand, the video podcasting capital of the world. I'm Bill Kirchenbauer, your host for the Kirchenbauer Half an Hour, along with Paul Brumbaugh. Say hi, Paul. There you go. There's Paul, and he's taking care of everything you see because I do nothing but sit here and talk. This is the Kirchenbauer Half an Hour, and we've been doing this now for, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks, and we're getting better all the time. We've been playing with the background. Um, this is real. I screwed around so much with a green screen, trying to make things look like a nice office, or I live on the beach, or I live on a mountaintop in Switzerland, and it didn't work. It wasn't working out. So I just thought I'm just going to go into my living room, and this is all real. None of it's fake. My bedroom is over in here. This is my. Let's see this. I have to. This is like backwards. Okay. That is an animation cell called Chuckamuck. It's got the Bugs Bunny drawing pictures, and it's from the book Chuckamuck by Chuck Jones. And I have other. I can't get this backwards. Yeah, I have books here that show that God, this is so backward. I have books that show that I read. So those are the books, and pretty much a perfect background. I have plants, and is there somebody vacuuming? That's all right. Is that a leaf blower? All right. Oh, okay. I was sure. I wasn't sure what to do. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Um, today I wanted to talk about places I've been, and I've been a lot of places. Paul, you ever hear that song? I've been everywhere. It's by Hank Snow. Yes, it's a fantastic show. I was going to ask you to pull it up and play it, but then I figured out YouTube would probably tag it, and music and all that. But it's by Hank Snow. Oh, okay. You can probably find it on YouTube if you want to look for it. But it's a great song. I've always wanted to be able to perform it myself. It's by Hank Snow, and I'm not a huge country music fan, but I like Willie and stuff like this. And this is an old song. This guy did this back in the 50s or 60s, and it kind of goes, "I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. Yakima, Yamana." It's just this long thing of list of towns and places that are just it's just amazing. It names just about every place you could think of in the United States. And Johnny Cash, I think, once did it, and it's a hard song to do because it's got all these names of places, and you have to spit them out like a rapper. But I've always admired that particular song because it kind of explains my life. I started out in Salzburg, Austria. That's where I was born, and then my dad was in the army, and have I have been just about everywhere. Now I'm no world. Well, I am. I'm a world traveler, but there's a lot of people who've been everywhere more than I have. I've never been to Africa. Uh, closest thing to South America is Costa Rica. But I just wanted to. I've lived in the United States now, a lot of places, and one of my favorite places that I lived, Paul, is San Francisco. In fact, I think it happens to be my, and I've seen the rest of the world, or the rest of the United States, New York, all the big cities, all the small cities, all the medium-sized cities. I've been to Spokane. I've been to, I lived in Muskegon, Michigan, but all of the cities that I've been to, I thought San Francisco really hit all the little boxes. It's picturesque, it's on the bay, it's got fresh air, it's got the Golden Gate Bridge, and so when I was about 21 or 22 and just come out to Los Angeles, I was very poor. I mean, I had a car and some luggage that turned into my furniture when I found an apartment. I found an apartment and I dragged the mattress that the guy who moved out had thrown out. And I went and got the mattress from down by the garbage cans and pulled it back up into the apartment. And it must have not that bad, or I must have not cared. But I slept on that mattress, and I took my luggage, I turned it into a table, and then when you first you by yourself. And I lived on a street called Grismer Avenue in Burbank, and it was, I guess it was a 1-bedroom. I'm not sure. I didn't live there that long because it wasn't that great. But I've lived a lot of places, and San Francisco was perhaps my most favorite. So, I know the point I was getting to is I was very poor at this time, and I think it was my mother's birthday. And my mother, since we had lived in San Francisco, she loved San Francisco. She just would always talk about it and want to go back there. And later on in the years, when I had some money, I was lucky enough to be able to afford a flyer after my dad died, to San Francisco, and I took her all over the city, and she loved that. But at this point, I was very poor. I didn't have, as they say, 2 dimes to rub together. So what I did was I wrote a poem. I wrote a poem about San Francisco, and I sent it to her, and I say, Mom, happy Mother's Day or happy birthday, whatever it was. I said, this is all I got. I sat down, and it took me a couple of hours, and I thought I'd write it. And my wife has, about 5 years ago, she broke this down into little squares and put it on a big frame in our living room with a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge across it. And this is a one-of-a-kind thing, so I'm gonna read this. Now, you've never heard this. We don't rehearse this shit.
No, we do not. And now I'm on the edge of my seat, Bill. You've got me.
Well, you should be, and it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. I've set eyes on many cities from the East Coast to the West. I've walked the streets of small importance, and I've trotted on the best. I found most cities to be just buildings that were raised by men and time, and just a few have such a touch that stays upon your mind. But San Francisco, she's a lady, and she throws her head back proud. Her hills are just her body, and she wears a foggy cloud. Her bay isn't ocean water, it's a very special wine. Because San Francisco, she's a lady and a very special kind. I felt her coldness chill my face, a chill that's hard to stop. And I've licked my lips to wet a crack when her breath is almost hot. But when the night has come to her and she lies back to recline, and the foghorn belches a morbid note, the effect is just divine. You have to love her style and the way she carries it. Because San Francisco, she's a lady, and a lady every bit.
Yeah, okay. And of course, we even heard that now the dog chimed in next door. He started barking at the end there. So you checked all the boxes. Let me ask you this. You mentioned about checking all the boxes. I agree. Your city has to check some boxes. What are some of those boxes? And you can think of any city, you could think of all of them. You could
Well,
just
we've
think of
lived
it
in
in
the,
general.
like I said, I went to like 14 schools in 12 years. I've been in every state in the union except Vermont. And I'd like to go there sometime. I was in Maine. I almost went over there just to say, but Vermont is the only state. I lived in Alaska for 3 years. Alaska
Which
was a
is
very
beautiful,
impressive.
right? Beautiful.
Yes, it is, but in 1961, it wasn't so beautiful. They had no satellites. It is colder than shit. And you really have to deal with the. I remember going up there for it's either dark all the time,
Right,
which is kind of a mind fuck,
right.
or it's light all the time, which is kind of a mind fuck. And there are parts like 2 months in between that are kind of get grayish, kind of in between. And it does get summerish. But then the mosquitoes are, but as far as nice weather, you got about 3 months kind of in the summer where you don't have to fight with it. And it's cold, it's big. Uh, my dad was stationed. We were in Fairbanks, and then we lived in a place called Kenai, which is on the Kenai Peninsula, about 100 miles from Anchorage. And back in I think remember this is 1961, and we lived in a fort that was had maybe 1,000 people that lived there, and we were there because they had a radar. It was a support fort for a radar station that they had all these big dishes looking for the Russians to coming over the North Pole, and that's what we were
Right.
there looking for Russians to come over the North Pole. There weren't that many people. My best friend was like a 19-year-old Puerto Rican guy who was married, so they gave him a house, and he and I would trade comic books.
Mm.
And every Saturday we go down to the PX, and books would come in, and he could buy like 20 of them, and I could buy afford to buy like two. And I thought, yeah, if I ever grow up, I'm going to get myself a job, and I'm going to spend all my money on comic books. But it got very cold. My dad literally went out. You heard of this? We're going out with a bucket of water and throwing it up out in the air, and it would come down in just a big sheet of glass almost.
Right.
And you had to plug in your car so it wouldn't go dead overnight. I went with my dad once to shoot a moose. Um, it's big, it's cold. The salmon, we used to, when the salmon were running, you just throw a hook in and you'd snag one. You didn't even have to wait. Uh,
Sounds like you have some really romantic times because you were
well,
a
in
kid,
retro,
right? You were a kid,
and
right?
yes, I was about 10 years old. In retrospect, yes, I did. I've been on the rivers are so cold, they're not blue, they're like greenish kind of, and they had these whirlpools in them, and we used to get a salmon that had eggs in it and use the eggs. This is why I can't look at salmon caviar. Uh, I used to, and I actually used to have a caviar company, but I couldn't look at the salmon ones because it always reminded me of the bait we used to use. You put it on the hook, and the salmon would eat their own eggs. But you'd see moose. You'd see, so my dad had an eyes. He'd drive down the road. And he'd go, "There's a moose," and he could spot them. And it's hard because they really blend in. Um, Again, it was 1961. Television, the Army base had their own TV station. They had like two cameras, and they started at like 6 o'clock and they ended at 8. And they show old Dobie Gillis reruns and cartoons and some other the cheapest stuff they could get. It was terrible, and I hated that. I had a library card, and I would go to the library, and the movie theater was right across the street, and I got in for free because I delivered the daily newsletter. I'd go down to wherever they printed them up, picked up like a bunch of newsletters, and I go around and put them in everybody's door. And there were probably 300 residences that were like strip apartments that people that had families would live in, and I'd go put those in their doors every day, and then I'd get to go to the movie theater anytime I wanted for free, and I had a bicycle. my best friend was an Eskimo. Yeah, you ever see that movie? My big friend, my giant friend, or
Oh
whatever it was.
yeah, my friend the giant. Or wait, no, no. You talking about? Is it animated?
No. It's a
Okay.
real. It's. I've lost you somehow. I can't see you.
Oh no,
No,
it's only because It's only because here I'm here. I just have to
okay.
do that once in a while.
Okay. Yeah. My good friend was this Inuit. I'll say Inuit because you're not supposed
Okay.
to say Eskimo. But his dad was a fisherman, and they'd go out and catch salmon, and he smelled like salmon, and he was a big guy, and I used to ride him around. He used to carry me around on the playground, and he'd have these big fat salmon sandwiches for lunch, and he'd eat those, and and my the girl I had a crush on, her name was Doniva Mullins, and her dad owned the electric company, which was in his garage. He had a generator or two in his garage of his house, which was in downtown Kenai, and he supplied the power. And I actually went back there when I was in my 30s to do a show for Budweiser because I did was it had this traveling show I worked
Did you stop
for.
and say hello?
No, I did, but I spent a night in Kenai, and the place had. I also on Saturdays I'd go with my dad down to where he worked, and they had the telephone. It was old. You had a telephone operator. If you want to make a call, you'd have to pick up the phone and talk to someone and have them dial. And on Saturday mornings they didn't have anybody, so I'd go in and I'd handle that telephone switchboard. Hello, who can I get you? And I'd ring up the thing and plug the little things in, like the 1920s movies. And we went
Or even
hunting
like
once.
Lily Tomlin, one ringy dingy,
Exactly.
two ringy dingy.
Exactly. The exact equipment, actually. And then we went moose hunting once. My dad shot a moose, and moose are really big, and it was really gory. They would. This guy knew how to gut the moose, and he'd cut it in the stomach, and it looked like a big red cave, and they'd get all the blood out, and he could do it because it was so cold out that the blood was still warm. It would keep his hands, and he'd cut, and so they cut up the moose, and then he put it on this giant sled that they could rent from the battalion that he belonged to. You could rent it. Say, here, I want to borrow it on Saturdays. And then you load up the moose pieces and you pull them back to your place and give it out to people because nobody had a freezer that big. And my dad got back to the house. I remember one time going, "Where's the liver? Where's the liver?" And so he had to go backtrack and found the liver and came back. So I lived there. That was very impressive in retrospect, but it gets, we were really out of it. There was no satellites. It was desolate, but I did, fishing, and I had, my dad bought me a 22 caliber rifle, which is something we wouldn't have done if we lived in North Hollywood. It was, it was fun, but Alaska.
I don't know. Have you been to North Hollywood lately?
Yeah, I have actually. Let's see.
That might actually be a good thing to have. The apocalypse has arrived.
Now, I have cousins that have never been out of the state that they live in, Michigan, and proud of it. I have with one cousin said, "I've never been out of the state of Michigan," and I thought, really? I mean, you wouldn't just go down to the border to 200 miles away and put your foot over and just say, "Hey, I got out." So I've been a lot of places.
How did you guys decide on Thailand? I know we've talked about it, but it must have checked a few boxes for you and your wife to uproot yourself.
Well, like I said, I came over here and saw that we had visited once back in the 80s, and it was pretty much third world there. I don't want to go over that because that's on episode 1, I think. But I'll tell you about going to Los Angeles. That's the big one. I lived in Florida, and I had done radio. I worked for WSUN St. Petersburg, Florida, and now we hear the melodic tones of the Raycon singers. And I hated this music, and it was, Frankie Valli, and not even that hip. It was Johnny Mathis and Perry Como, and that's the kind of music I like now, actually. But it was not my, I went to radio and television. I went to community college, or as 13th and 14th grade, as I like to call it. And I took radio and television, and I learned how to say February and all those kind of broadcasting. And back then, again, even broadcasting was, they had one color camera, and it was radio, and the people that did it, they couldn't make a living in it, so they decided to teach it. And I got a job at a radio station it was actually in the mailroom, but on the weekend they let me run religious programming. And I lived there. That was the longest I lived anywhere. I went to high school there, and I did theater. And people always ask me, how do you get into show business? And you just kind of gradually happen. I remember seeing West Side Story at my high school play. They did it, and I remember seeing that live. I thought, wow, look at that, Chris, magnificent. They did a pretty good job at the high school, and I auditioned for the. So I said, I'm gonna try to do this, and I auditioned for the part of Sakini in Tea House of the August Moon, which is the part that Marlon Brando played in the movie Tea House of the August Moon. And you have to play a guy that's Japanese, and I kind of got little slitty eyes anyway, and they put makeup. Anyway, I got the part, and I had a great time. And the biggest compliment was I had an Asian woman come back stage afterwards with her son, and she looked at me. She said, "You're not Asian." I said, "No." She said, "Oh, I thought you were Asian." This is an Asian woman telling me she thought I was Asian. So I got the bug. I got the bug for that, and then I did impressions. I did puppets when I was a kid, and so anyway, I was in radio doing this radio, and my girlfriend at the time won a scholarship to the California Institute of the Arts, which is a very prestigious college of arts. And she said, "I've got to go to California," and I was like 19, madly in love. And I said, "Well, I just put in an application to the hip rock station in town, and I'm supposed to hear back from them. If I get the job, I'm going to stay here, and if I don't, I'll see you in California." Well, 2 weeks went. She took off. 2 weeks went by, and I got a call from the guys, and they said, "Well, you were second, but we went with this other guy, so sorry." So I went, "Oh." I packed up all my stuff, and my mother cried, and I had a car, a 19 something 68 Mustang, and I drove to California in about 4 hours because there was sex at the end of that drive.
You were motivated.
I was motivated. No, not 4 hours. It took. I think I did about 2.5 days. I remember going about 120 to Arizona. It was too late to give me a ticket. And I got to. She lived in Sepulveda. She had gotten an apartment in Sepulveda, and I went and I knocked on the door, and she opened the door and she went, "Oh, hi." And I looked, and there was a guy sitting on the couch with his shirt off. And I said, "Hi." She said, "Oh, yeah, this is David. He lives downstairs." So the guy gets up, puts his shirt on, and goes downstairs. And I'm an idiot. I didn't want to believe she couldn't go 2 weeks without snagging another boyfriend. So needless to say, things didn't go well. And we were planning to live together. I had to go out and get my own place. That was it. She was in love with this guy. He was a musician. And so I went to Grismer Avenue in Burbank, and I got this apartment and didn't have a job, and then just get into it. Just I took improv classes and mime, and just So I lived in LA. LA is the place I lived the longest. I've lived in Wisconsin. That was great. Milwaukee is nice if you drink beer. And if you don't, when your relatives come there, they're going to want to go to all the beer places. I've been in. Now, let's talk about that's America. America's easy. As far as like outside of there, I spent 2 months in Australia, in Sydney, at a place called Kinsella's. And Australia, even though they speak English, it's a whole different culture. And comedy, a lot of it is local. You have to know the localities and stuff. But it's a big country. I suggest reading a Sunburned Country by Bill Bryson. It's a kind of a travelogue. If you've never read Bill Bryson, you should read all his books. He's my favorite author. My favorite place that we lived was when my dad went to Vietnam. My mother and we went and lived in Santa Rosa, California. And I think that was my favorite place because it has close proximity to San Francisco. And it was in this area that is so, and you know this, we lived in Santa Rosa. And if you go half an hour to the west, you hit the ocean.
Right.
And if you go, halfway between that, you hit the Russian River. And if you go inland east, you hit wine country, and then you hit mountains. And if you go north, you hit the redwoods and out, might as well be in northern Canada. And if you head south, you're in San Francisco. So I found it to be one of the most diverse places that I ever lived. And if I had all the money in the world, aside from the earthquake thingy, I think that is probably the most lovely and diverse and overall cool areas. I can see why the hippies loved it. I was there during the hippie era. I can see why they picked it. It's a lovely part of the world, and that whole area, kind of where you live too. That whole area from Santa Rosa down to Carmel, just really beautiful part of the country. I went to Europe. I've done Venice. Venice is amazing. It looks like Disney created it. It's so quaint. You just go, this is not real. This is not real. And I enjoyed Eastern Europe a lot. If you ever go to Europe, and you've been to Europe, go to Eastern Europe. My heritage actually is I'm Romanian. I always thought I was Austrian because I was born in Austria, but I was a byproduct of a little fling between an American soldier and a Romanian girl who ran from Hitler with her family to Austria. And I was put up for adoption, and my parents that adopted me, he was a soldier too, and they couldn't have children, and they saved my life. And they were going to kill me, actually. They were going to euthanize me, the place, because I was very sick. And my mother never told me that. She told my wife that. She never told me that. She said I was sick, but she didn't ever told me they were going to off me.
Oh, jeez.
So
that's nice. That's nice to find out.
Yeah, it threw me off a little bit. I mean, I knew they saved my ass, so I was lucky. I mean, I think about it, I'm really a lucky guy that I was an orphan. And the earliest memories, and I don't know if these are real memories or not, but I remember seeing stained glass and lots of cribs. And I don't know where I'd make that up, but I've had that memory ever since I was a kid. And so I think the orphanage might have been in a church, and there were lots of other kids in cribs. And that's like a memory, that's
kind of one of your earliest memories.
Yeah, that in Georgia. Then okay, and then I remember, Georgia. We lived in Fort Benning, Georgia. It was a series of different forts and bases, and we went to Milwaukee. My dad worked with the Nike missiles back then. And then we San Francisco and El Paso. We lived in El Paso, Texas. We lived in Davenport, Iowa. My dad got out of the Army and thought he was going to be a chiropractor, but that didn't work out. So, and then I went into comedy, and like my good friend Gallagher says, I will be appearing everywhere eventually, and I've been just about everywhere in this country. It's a big country, but you know what? It's a big world too, and I feel sorry for people that live just kind of in that little regional area, maybe that state, that little area there. A wise man once said, "Don't tell me where you've been. Tell me." Oh no, I got it backwards. Wise man once said, "Don't tell me where you went to school. Tell me where you've been." And I think that holds true because there's a big world out there, and it's not everything done the way you do it, or the way you speak, or the way they believe in. It's just a big, wide, wonderful world. I think probably the guy that traveled it the most was Ripley. Remember Ripley? Ripley's Believe It or Not. That
Yep.
guy would travel the whole world looking for weird people and weird things and stuff like that. And then Anthony Bourdain,
Oh yeah.
I think he traveled a lot. Traveling's really gotten to be well. We gripe and bitch about it, but we can be places in a couple hours that used to take days. Used to back in the 30s, if you want to go from LA to New York fast, you took a train and it took 4 days. So it's improved. You can be anywhere. The world has gotten smaller, and those are the places I've been. And so I would just like to say that life is a crapshoot, and you don't even get to roll your own dice. So that's it for the Kirchenbauer Half an Hour. For me and Paul Brumbaugh, take care. I hope you enjoyed part of us talking today. And come back next time. We're on every week. So take care. Paul?
All right.